In this session, we are going to deal with a very interesting topic that is very important in case of a human body. We all see the world around us, isn't it? And if I ask you why do you see the things around you, you would say because you have eyes. You are able to see the colorful world around you, isn't it? So today we have to deal with a very important topic, the most interesting one, the human eye and the colorful world around us. So to discuss this, we need to understand what is the speciality of the eyes, how it works, what are its different parts, etc. So as you can see in this figure, there are different parts for eyes. There is cornea, there is retina, iris, eyeball, then aqueous humor, vitreous humor, and many more things. So we need to analyze each one in detail. What happens to see the things, isn't it? So cornea, as you can see in this figure, is a thin membrane, and it is through this thin membrane that light enters the eye. And cornea forms a transparent bulge in front of the surface of eyeball. And the fact is that most of the refraction of light which enters our eyes occur at the outer surface of the cornea. You can see also the eyeball. The size of the eyeball is having an approximate diameter of 2.3 centimeter. And as you can see in the figure, it's roughly in the form of a sphere. Spherical shape is being maintained approximately by the eyeball. The crystalline lens is yet another important part of human eyes. What may be the duty of the crystalline lens? Of course, it's a lens, isn't it? So the crystalline lens has the very important function of adjustment of the focal length, that is, which is required to focus the objects at different distances on the retina. So I said a word retina. So what may be that? Retina? Retina. It is very another important part of our human eye. It is the light sensitive screen of human eye, as you can see in the figure. The lens of human eyes forms images on this light sensitive screen, retina. It is a very delicate membrane and it has enormous light sensitive cells. So there are many components in light sensitive cells. They are mainly rods and cones. So rods are sensitive to dim lights and they help in scotopic vision. What will be the case of cones? They will be sensitive to bright light and they help in color detection. So if it is night time, you will be able to see a little bit because the rods are functioning or they help in scotopic vision. So these light sensitive cells get activated upon illumination and finally generate the electric signals. So another one which is leading this to the final step is the iris and the pupil. Iris is a dark muscular diaphragm that controls the size of pupil. You can see where the iris and pupil are being placed. So iris is located behind the cornea and pupil is the first or the most important one that regulates and controls the amount of light entering the eye. For example, if you see a bright light suddenly, your eye dilates because the pupil is the one that controls the amount of light entering the eye. So once all these processes happens and the image is finally formed on the retina. So when this image is formed on the light sensitive screen of human eye, that's retina, the light sensitive cells that is inside the retina will get activated and finally they will generate electric signals. So once these electric signals are being generated, interesting happens. So before this I told you that the light sensitive cells get illuminated, isn't it? So for that there should be an image on the retina. So what will be the nature of that retina image that is formed? The main thing that we need to consider is the eye lens forms a real and inverted image of the object on the retina, which is the light sensitive screen. So the nature of the image is that it forms a real, that means an image that can be obtained on a screen, as well as an inverted image. So eye lens also plays a very crucial role in case of formation of the images. So light sensitive cells in the retina then get activated upon illumination and they produce the electrical signals. Then finally, these electrical signals are carried by our optic nerves. As you can see in the picture, the optic nerves is being depicted. So, the optic nerves then carries these electrical signals to our brain. Then finally what happens? Brain is our main component, or it is the main source of everything that happens in our body, isn't it? So, it controls everything, our emotions. Maybe the emotions come from heart, but our thoughts, our deeds, everything is controlled by brain, isn't it? So, the brain is the one, you can say brain as the superior one of our body, isn't it? So, the brain processes the final information and sends the message to eye. And finally, we are able to see the object. So, together all these components, that is the cornea, the iris, the pupil, the light sensitive screen, that is retina, along with the light sensitive cells like rods, cones, and what else? The crystalline lens, the eye lens, everything fully together contribute to the forming of a working of our eye and finally the image formation. Hope you have understood what is the main functioning or the processes behind that happens us to see the images, isn't it? So now we have to understand what do you mean by the power of accommodation of our eye. So in these sessions we deal with everything with eyes, isn't it? So the power of accommodation of eye should be dealt. As the name suggests, accommodate means to adapt to changes, isn't it? Just like to the weather conditions that we adapt, we humans, our eyes has also adapt according to the external conditions, isn't it? So this ability of our eye lens to adjust the focal length is called as accommodation. We can specifically say it as the ability of the eyes to focus. The objects may be sometimes near or sometimes they may be distant. So it is the ability of the eyes to focus both nearer as well as distant objects by adjusting the focal length. As we all know, the eye lens is mainly composed of a jelly-like material. So it's the curvature that can be changed according to change the focal length. That is, the curvature can be changed to some extent, not to a very beyond limit, but to some extent with the help of ciliary muscles. So the change in curvature of the lens results in finally the changing of focal length. For example, it is mainly happening in case of ciliary muscles. That is, as you can see, this is the main functioning of ciliary muscles. That is, ciliary muscles lead to change in curvature, which finally leads to change in shape of our lens a little bit and finally change in the focal length. So how it changes according to the external conditions is very important. As you can see in the picture, suppose if you are seeing an object which is very near to us or nearby, what happens? The ciliary muscles is the main important working person here, isn't it? So the ciliary muscles will contract. Why? Because there is a pressure or strain, isn't it? So when we are watching the things so close, a little bit pressure is being built or a tension is created for our dear ciliary muscles, isn't it? So the ciliary muscles will contract. Then what happens to our eye lens? The lens will become thicker, a little more thicker. Then what happens is that since the eye lens become thicker, it is fused into a little more convex shape. As we know, the eye lens is particularly of a convex shape, isn't it? And then the focal length will decrease as the convex shape is becoming more convex. The final focal length will decrease and thus the curvature also behaves in the opposite manner. That is, curvature will increase. That is, when focal length decreases, the curvature will increase. So the image finally falls on the retina. So according to this condition, when the objects are nearby, the eye will accommodate. How? It will take a thicker shape so that the image falls on the retina. So what may be happening in the just other case? Now we have told what happens when we view the objects nearby. So what may be happening when we view the objects that is at a distance? We can have a detailed discussion. That is, suppose I am placing an object far away. Then my ciliary muscles will be relaxed, isn't it? It is not having so much strain because it is at a very far distance. So the ciliary muscles is seeing the object. So the ciliary muscles will relax and expand. And what happens? When the ciliary muscles expand, the lens will become thinner. So then this is relaxed into a less convex shape. In the previous case, when we view the objects nearby, the convex shape will be more. Now it will change into a less convex shape. That is, the eye is mainly having the convex shape. So when we view the objects that are nearby, this convex shape will be increased. When we view the objects that are far away or at a distance, the convex shape becomes less. And what happens to the focal length? The just opposite of the previous case. That is, when it is relaxed into a less convex shape, the focal length will increases. Then what happens? When the focal length increases, curvature will decrease. So they are inversely proportional. When focal length of the eye lens increases, curvature will decrease. Then finally the image will be falling on the retina. So here our eye is accommodating by taking a thinner shape. That is, the convex shape has been reduced. So the eye is accommodating by taking a thinner shape that the final image is falling on the retina. So ciliary muscles play a very important role in accommodation of a lens, or which helps in the formation of image in the correct places according to the external conditions. So the power of accommodation is mainly regulated by the ciliary muscles. So when we deal with the power of accommodation, two important terms that we have to be very familiar with is the least distance of distant vision and the far point of eye. That is, when we hear the word least, we understood that it is a minimum, isn't it? So the minimum distance at which the objects can be seen most clearly and distinctly without any strain is called the least distance of distinct vision. For example, if I am reading my newspaper and I am placing it so close to me, I won't be able to see it clearly, isn't it? We feel a strain or pressure in our eyes, isn't it? So there is a minimum distance. Apart, we need to keep the object so that they should be seen clearly. So least distance of distinct vision means it is a near point of the eye. For example, we take a standard value. For a young adult who is having a very normal vision, the near point is considered to be about 25 cm. So if you need to see an object clearly, you shouldn't keep it before the 25 cm. Up to 25 cm, it will not be so clear to you. So if you keep it beyond 25 cm, from that point onwards, it will be distinctly seen. So minimum 25 cm distance should be maintained within the object and the person who is looking. Then what may be the far point of eye? So it can be defined so. The farthest point up to which the eye can be seen in a very clear manner is called as the far point of the eye. For example, if we say that it should be something in the infinity, that is, it is the farthest point. We are considering the point that is farthest away. So the farthest away point that is known to us is infinity, isn't it? So it is the farthest point up to which we can see the objects clearly. Beyond that, we will not be able to see the objects clearly. So the power of accommodation mainly includes, as we have already discussed, eye lens as well as ciliary muscles. So we have already told how ciliary muscles are capable of modifying the lens curvature, which finally leads to change in focal length as well as formation of image on the retina. So now we have to analyze what are the defects of vision and their correction. So as students as well as the people who are working in different areas of life like technological, industrial or any purposes, we may be facing defects of vision. It may be genetical, it may be due to our lifestyles, or it may be due to some external factors. For example, you may have seen many people who are wearing spectacles. Somebody in your home, some of your friends, or even the persons you are watching me, isn't it? So that can be corrected. There are remedies for that. But we need to understand how these defects are happening to our beautiful eyes, isn't it? So we need to be very careful to understand what are the defects that is caused, and we need to find certain remedies. For that remedies, we are placing specs. Okay. So first one is myopia or the nearsightedness. It is a particular defect of vision in which a person can see the nearby objects clearly. So what we may not be able to see? We may not be able to see the distant objects clearly. Why is it so? As you can see from the figure, a myopic eye, in case of a myopic eye, the image is formed in front of the retina. What was retina? Retina is the light sensitive screen of our eye. So the image, instead of forming at retina, it will be formed in front of the retina. For a myopic eye person, the far point will be nearer than infinity. We have already said the far point of the person will be up to infinity. For such a person who is having myopic eye, the far point will be nearer than the infinity. What may be the reasons that lead to a myopic eye? That is the increase in the curvature of the eye lens, or it can be due to an increase in the length of the eyeball. Mainly these two factors lead to a myopic eye. So how can we correct it? That is another question, isn't it? If you are having a myopic eye, you need to correct it. How could you do that? We have already discussed that a myopic eye forms an image in front of the retina instead of forming it on the retina. So it can be corrected by using a suitable concave lens. So what was the speciality of concave lens? We know that convex lens is a converging lens. Concave lens is a diverging lens. So if I place, as in the figure, a concave lens in front of a myopic eye, it will bring back the image to the retina, and thus the defect will be corrected. So in order to have a remedy for your myopic eye in which the image is formed in front of the retina, you can use a concave lens. So if a person is suffering from myopia or nearsightedness where you can't see the far objects, then you should wear a concave lens or a concave spectacles. And what may be the other defects of vision? Just like if you are not able to see the distant objects, there will be the other way also, isn't it? So we can check what is the other one, that is hypermetropia or farsightedness. Hypermetropia, it's yet another shortcoming of vision. In this case, what happens is the persons will be able to see the distant objects very clear or very vivid. The problem is that person won't be able to see the nearby objects clearly. What may be the reason? As you can see from the figure, in case of a hypermetropic eye, the image is formed behind the retina. What was the myopic case? In that case, the image was formed in front of the retina. In case of hypermetropia or farsightedness, the image is formed behind the retina. For a hypermetropic person with farsightedness, the near point will be farther away from the normal near point. What was the normal near point? The normal near point was 25 cm, isn't it? But for a person with hypermetropia, his near point will be away from 25 cm. What may be the reasons that lead to hypermetropia? It can be either due to decrease in curvature of eye lens as well as the length of eyeball. So if there is a decrease in both of them or either of them, it can lead to hypermetropia. So how could you correct hypermetropia? As you can see in the picture, the image is being formed in the behind of the retina, isn't it? So in order to correct that, we can use a suitable convex lens. So what was the specialty of convex lens? Convex lens is our converging lens, isn't it? After refraction, they converge the light. So the convex lens, which is also called as a converging lens, will provide an additional focusing power, and that finally leads to the formation of image correctly on the retina instead of forming it behind. So myopia can be corrected by using concave lens, whereas hypermetropia can be corrected by using convex lens, which is our converging lens. There is yet another one that is called as presbyopia. It is also a common defect that is seen. It is but mainly seen in case of old people. You may be familiar with what is cataract, isn't it? It is a particular type of disease conducted with eyes which is seen in case of old age people or people who are aging. It is because there will be differences in vision and our vision may become like cloudy or milky. It is mainly due to differences in vision that happens that lead to cataract. We will feel like a cloudy or milky form in our eyes. So, for that, in order to correct that, cataract surgeries are being carried out. So, this surgeries finally will help us to rectify. Just like that, another defect of vision that is happening in old people is presbyopia. In case of presbyopia, these people may not be able to see the nearby objects clearly. It is because there will be an increase in the distance of near point of the eye. So, what was the near point of our normal eye? It was 25 centimeter. For a person who is suffering from presbyopia, he will not be able to see the nearby objects clearly. It's because there will be an increase in the distance of near point. This is mainly happening due to the weakening of ciliary muscles, and as we age, there will be a decrease or a fluctuation in the flexibility of our eye lens. So, this can be also corrected, isn't it? For that, here we use a suitable convex lens. Sometimes they won't be able to see both near as well as distant objects. For some persons, only they will be able to see the far objects, whereas for some, they will be only able to see the near objects. But for some people who are extremely having large defect effects, they will not be able to see both nearby as well as distant objects. In such cases, what do we do? Instead of one lens, sometimes we may be forced to use bifocal lenses. That is a combination of both concave and convex lens. That is convex lens which is the diverging lens as well as the concave lens which is the converging lens. We have already said myopia or nearsightedness where you cannot see the distant objects, we use which type of lenses? A concave lens. Whereas in case of the another one where there is a hypermetropic eye or farsightedness, which one is used? In that case, we use a convex lens or a converging lens. So, in order to rectify both, if it is appearing as a combination, we use the bifocal lens. So, if you use a bifocal lens, the upper part will be a concave, which helps in correction of distant vision, and the lower part is a convex, which helps in correction of the near vision. So, bifocal lenses will help us to solve the problem if a person is having both problems with distant vision as well as the nearer vision. This is clearly being depicted in this picture how the presbyopic eye looks. So, now we need to understand how refraction takes place. Refraction happens through different medias. It can be in a prism, it can be in a glass slab, etc. So, what was basically refraction? Refraction is the bending of light as it moves from one medium to another. So, in this picture, if you see, you can see a glass prism. What is the peculiarities of this particular prism? A glass prism can be said to be a transparent one, isn't it? You will be able to see a little bit if you look through glass prisms. That's what happens in the lab also, isn't it? When students are eagerly doing experiments, they look through the glass prisms, isn't it? It's because of our curiosity, isn't it? So, it is mainly a transparent object. And it will be mainly having 2 triangular ends and 3 rectangular sides. So, glass prism mainly has 2 triangular ends and 3 rectangular sides. We have already dealt what happens in case of refraction of light through a glass slab. So, what was the peculiarity there? There the emergent ray was parallel to the incident ray. But what will be the result in this case? We can see. Suppose as in the diagram, the incident ray is denoted by PE, isn't it? So, if the incident ray is falling, that is when a ray of light passes through a glass prism, you can see it is being bent twice. The first bending is at the air glass interface and the second one is at the glass air interface. As you can infer from the figure, PE is my incident ray. So, EF is my refracted ray, that is inside the glass prism the refraction happens. So, my incident ray PE is going from air to inside the glass. So, then the refraction happens and forms the EF, that is the refracted ray. Then we need to get the result. For that we need the emergent ray, isn't it? So, my emergent ray would be FS. So, FS is my emergent ray. If you obtain such an emergent ray, you can compare what is the similarity between the incident ray and the emergent ray. You can see that the emergent ray is deviated by an angle to the direction of the incident ray, isn't it? And that is being represented here as angle D, that is the angle of deviation. But what was the case of refraction through a glass slab? There the emergent ray was parallel to the incident ray, which is being laterally displaced by a small distance. But here it is deviated by an angle to the direction of incident ray, and that angle is called as angle of deviation in case of a prism. So, what may be the reason here that it suffers a deviation in angle? It is because of the peculiar shape of the prism that makes the emergent ray bend at an angle to the direction of the incident ray. So, we have already stated that there is a difference in refraction of light when we compare the glass slab and the prism, isn't it? So, we have said, as we have inferred, here the emergent ray will not be parallel to the incident ray of light, isn't it? So, here what happens is there is deviation two times. First one is when the light ray enters the glass prism from air, and second one is when the light ray comes out of the prism from the glass to the outside air. So, at the air glass interface as well as from the glass air interface, two times deviation happens. So, this is because of the refracted surface of prism which are not parallel to each other that this phenomenon is happening. So, in case of a prism, the refracting surfaces are not parallel to each other, and hence the emergent ray will not be parallel to the incident ray. So, since the refracting surfaces are not parallel, the emergent ray and incident ray are not parallel, and thus the ray of light is deviated on passing through a prism, and it forms the angle of deviation. Yet another phenomenon that we need to find is dispersion. So, what do you mean by dispersion? To disperse means to spread out. You may have seen in assemblies, after you have standing for 10 or 20 minutes, your school leader says or your school head says, school assembly disperse, isn't it? So, what happens till that? From that point onwards, you will be roaming around. From your attention position, you will be becoming the real you, isn't it? So, dispersion is yet another phenomenon where a beam of white light is passing through a glass prism. As you can infer from the picture, it is also a prism that is being shown here. What was the peculiarity of prism? In case of prism, the refracting surfaces are not parallel, and here it is having two triangular edges and three rectangular sides. So, when I pass a white light through a glass prism, what happens? On the other side, you can see the beautiful Vibgyor colors, isn't it? So, the white light when passing through a prism splits into a band of colors and you get a spectrum. So, this is called as dispersion of white light, isn't it? So, there are our beautiful colors, Vibgyor, that is violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange and red. So, you get a band of 7 colors, and this is being seen as a beautiful rainbow also. So, if somebody asks you what leads to the formation of rainbow, what would you say now onwards? It is clearly the dispersion of light leads to the formation of our beautiful rainbow also. But here I used a prism to disperse light. But what in case of forming of a rainbow? Do I use any prism or somebody act as a prism there? We need to find out. So, when light is dispersed into the 7 colors by a prism, we get a broad spectrum. So, the different colors of light went through different angles. that is violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange or red. All these colors are separate and they bend through different angles with respect to the incident ray. So, as they are formed as a final part, they form different angles with respect to the incident ray after passing through the prism. So, here you can see colors from violet to red. So, how they do different in the bending? So, the main answer is that they bend through different angles. How is it possible? For that, we need to analyze how there is a variation. If you take the chart that compares the wavelength of the colors from violet to red, you can see violet is the one which is having very least wavelength of nanometer, whereas red, which is at the other extreme end, it is having a wide range of wavelength. If you say particularly, we can say violet may be having nearer to 400 nanometer, then the red light may be approximately equal to 800 nanometer. So, a light which is in between or color that is in between is blue, isn't it? Violet, indigo, blue, then green, then yellow and orange and finally red. So, blue is having a moderate range between 400 to 500 nanometer. So, the one which is having more wavelength is red and the one which is having less wavelength will be, that is the first one, that is violet. So, the red light which is having the more wavelength will be the one that is having least bending, whereas violet which is having very less wavelength will be having the one which is bending the most. So, the final point is that red light will be bending the least, whereas the violet will be bending the most. So, the rays of every color that is present will emerge along different angles and different paths and thus becomes distinctly clear. So, it is this band of distinct colors that we see as a spectrum. So, hope you are clear with dispersion of white light and the magnification spectrum which is formed by a glass prism. So, we need to take this dispersion into the real life application of the very beautiful rainbows. So, the rainbow is being formed. So, in order to understand that, we need to have a picture and a clear concept. That is, if I split a white light by passing through a glass prism, I get 7 colors. What may be happening if I do the reverse? For example, after getting the 7 colors, can I convert back into the single color white? We can analyze this by using this. That is, there will be a recombination of spectrum of the white light. How does it happen is, we need to specifically place 2 prisms. But the peculiarity, as you can see in the figure, is one will be present in the straight position and the other prism will be kept in an inverted position. So, just like the thing that we have already dealt, first prism, when I pass the white light to the first prism, there will be refraction as well as dispersion is happening in case of prism, and there will be a branch of or the band of spectrum that is appearing from the first prism. But in case of second prism, I am passing this band of colors through them, and you can see the final product that is emerging from the second prism, which is kept in an inverted position, is our first component, white light itself. So, when a beam of white light is passed through a glass prism, first it splits into its component colors. That is, when white light is passed through the glass prism, it turns into violet, indigo, then what else? Vibgyor, that is blue, green, yellow, orange and red. But again, when I pass these colors into an inverted glass prism, what happens? They will recombine to produce our final white light. So, we can again form our white light from the band of colors that we are obtaining when I pass my white light through a prism and form the band of 7 colors. So, there is a recombination that is possible if we place another prism also in the inverted position. So, now we can analyze how the rainbow that always excited us, a phenomenon that has made us so much excited all throughout our childhood, that is rainbow. So how is a rainbow formed? What is the physics or science behind rainbow? Similarly, you may have understood like it is caused by the dispersion of sunlight, isn't it? So how or when it is formed? Mostly rainbow is formed when there is raining at the time of the sunshine, isn't it? So they should come in a simultaneous manner. So what happens is when a sunlight or the white light falls on the raindrops, that is already it may be raining or it may have rained some time before. So when the sunlight falls on the raindrops and leaves them, then this white light will be refracted. And as the light suffers refraction, there will be a band of spectrum or 7 colors that is formed in the sky. But here there should be prism, isn't it? We have already taught dispersion happens when white light passes through a prism, isn't it? So here who may be acting as prism? In this particular situation, the tiny raindrops that is present in the atmosphere act as glass prisms and they help to split the white sunlight. So rainbow is a natural phenomenon and it is a natural spectrum. So it happens usually in the sky after the shower or after a good rain has happened. So this dispersion of sunlight by the tiny raindrops present in the atmosphere contributes to our beautiful and magnificent rainbow. So as you can see in this picture, the sunlight comes, the refraction happens, the rays travel at different angles, there will be total internal reflection and finally refraction. So not only there happens the dispersion but also a series of different phenomena of light. So where do you see a rainbow? Suppose there is sun that is being risen or in the air. You can see always a rainbow in the direction opposite to that of the sun. So what happens is the water droplets that is present in the atmosphere after the rain shower will be presenting as small prisms. What they will do is they will refract. You already know through glass prisms there is refraction and also there will be dispersion. So they will refract as well as they disperse the incident sunlight. Then there will be total internal reflection which is happening inside the raindrop which is acting as a prism as you can see in the figure. And finally there will be refraction again and finally when it comes out of the raindrop you see it as a bunch of raindrops doing the same job but finally lead to the beautiful rainbow. So the raindrops are not doing a simple job, they do different jobs like refraction, dispersion as well as total internal refraction as well as the final refraction. So due to the dispersion of light as well as the internal reflection along with refraction, finally different colors are being reaching the observer's eye like yours and mine. So the rainbow which is formed is a collection result of all these processes. So now we need to find and discuss about atmospheric refraction. That is a refraction that is happening in atmosphere. As the name suggests, atmospheric refraction means refraction that is happening to the Earth's atmosphere. That is, the light rays when refracted take place in the Earth's atmosphere. It's called as atmospheric refraction. So how does this atmospheric refraction take place? That is, when light rays enter the atmosphere, there is air and every air layer has different temperatures. These air layers have different optical densities, isn't it? Air is having different layers and these air layers have different optical densities. We already know that every place on air surface doesn't have same densities, isn't it? There are different optical densities for different layers of air. So there will be cooler air layer as well as a warmer air layer, isn't it? So the cooler air layer will be the optically denser one, whereas the warmer air layer will be the optically rarer medium for the light rays. One of the main important examples or application of atmospheric refraction is the stars twinkling. It is very wonderful and mind-soothing to see that stars twinkle, isn't it? We all are fascinated by looking in the night sky as we see the twinkling of stars. So how does it happen? It is because of atmospheric refraction. But is it due to the sunlight? No, because during night time we mainly get moonlight or the starlight. So the twinkling of stars, it's basically due to the atmospheric refraction of the starlight. So what happens or how this atmospheric refraction happens is, the starlight on entering the atmosphere, that is Earth's atmosphere, it will undergo the refraction and finally it reaches the Earth. So when the starlight comes from the star, once it reaches the Earth's atmosphere, then it will suffer continuous refraction before it reaches the Earth's surface. So how does it happen? Is a very important question. That is, the atmospheric refraction occurs in a medium of gradually changing refractive index. What was refractive index? It is the ratio of speed of light in air or vacuum to speed of light in medium. So only if there is a medium of gradually changing refractive index, the atmospheric refraction can occur. So the twinkling of stars is one of the important applications. That is, the atmosphere will bend the starlight towards the normal. When does this happen? That is, the sunlight is also bent towards the normal in case of day phenomena. Just like that, in case of night, there is bending of starlight towards the normal. When was this light bending towards normal happening? That is, when a ray of light enters from a rarer medium to a denser medium, there will be bending of light towards the normal. So this is what happens here also. That is, when the ray of starlights enter our atmosphere, it is moving from a rarer medium to a denser medium, and that's why the starlight will bend towards the normal. So due to this, there is an apparent position of star. The star is having an apparent position change that is different from its actual position. So for us who are observing from Earth, the star will appear slightly higher or above its actual position when we view near the horizon. But do this apparent position always same? No. That is, the apparent position of the star is always not stationary. That is, it keeps on changing slightly. Why is it so? It's because the physical conditions of Earth's atmosphere are not stationary, isn't it? When it is raining, when it is windy, when it is cool, all the time the physical conditions are constantly changing. So ultimately, the different optical densities, or whether it is entering from a rarer medium to a denser medium or a denser medium to a rarer medium, determines the actual position and the apparent position. In this picture, you can see how the atmospheric refraction contributes to twinkling of stars. The atmosphere refracts the starlight. That is, when the light of star enters the atmosphere, that is atmosphere of Earth, it will undergo refraction. It's because there will be different optical densities of the air. So there will be an apparent star position as well as the actual position. So there will be a decrease in refractive index since the optical densities are different. So for us, the star may appear a little more above its actual position near the horizon. So the stars will appear bright at one moment and it will dim at the another moment. So this is a picture which defines why do the stars twinkle. That is, light from stars happens to come. When it reaches the Earth's atmosphere, it suffers the atmospheric refraction and finally leads to the twinkling of the stars. But there occurs a question, does the planets twinkle? So the answer is, we need to find. So for that, we need to analyze the positioning of planets as well as the stars compared to our Earth. We know that planets are closer to Earth than the stars. The light from the stars are always considered as point sources of light. That is, they appear to be a single point source. But what is in case of planets? The light from planets are considered as extended sources of light. So there is a difference when we consider the planet as well as stars. The planets are considered as extended source. What is in the case of stars? Stars are considered as point sources of light. So we have already stated planets are assumed as collection of many point-sized light sources, isn't it? Whereas another one, that is stars, is a point-sized source of light. The another one, that is a planet, would be a collection of the point-sized light source. Since the planets are considered to be a collection of point-sized light source, what happens is there will be a total variation in the total amount of light that enters our eyes. So all these point-sized sources will be contributing different amount of light, and finally they will average out to 0. That's why the lights from planets will nullify the twinkling effects and we don't see the planets twinkle. So yet another application of atmospheric refraction is the advanced sunrise and delayed sunset, as you can see from the figure. That is, you may see the phenomenon that the sun is visible to you maybe 2 minutes before or a little minutes later after sunset. Why does it happen? It's also because of atmospheric refraction. That is, at the time of sunrise and in case of sunset, there is a difference, isn't it? That is, at the time of sunrise, sunlight will be coming from a less dense air to a more dense air, isn't it? That is, light rays entering from rarer medium to a denser medium. And in this case, sunlight is refracted downwards, as you can see in the picture. And because of this, the sun will appear to be raised above the horizon than it actually is. The apparent flattening of the sun's disk at sunrise and at sunset is also due to the phenomenon of atmospheric refraction, that is refraction that is happening in the Earth's atmosphere. Another important application or daily phenomenon, that is scattering of light. So light goes through different processes like dispersion, reflection, refraction, etc. Just like that, another important category of light's important phenomenon is scattering. So what do you mean by scattering? The applications of scattering of light is found in our daily lives in a very wide range. But we need to understand what it really means. Scattering of light is a phenomenon in which a beam of light is redirected in different directions when they interact with the particles that is present in the medium. Suppose if I am considering the air as a medium, the light will be having some interaction with the particles of the medium, that is air, and finally they will be redirected into different positions or directions. So we can simply term the scattering of light as throwing light in various random directions on different types of suspended particles. We know in air there are different suspended particles, isn't it? So the light is being thrown in random directions on various types of suspended particles. In order to understand this, we need to understand what do you mean by a colloid. So what do you mean by the word colloid? Colloids are really mixtures. And how can we define? They have microscopic dispersed insoluble particles. That is, one of the categories of colloids is that they should have insoluble particles which are suspended in another substance. So the size of the suspended particles is also having a range. In a colloid, the size of the suspended particles can range from almost 1 to 1000 nanometers, that is about 10 raised to minus 9 meters. And one of the main peculiarities of these colloids, which is a mixture, is that the suspended particles will not settle in case of colloids. So we need to understand how scattering of light happens in colloidal solutions. For that, we are taking here an experimental setup as you can see in the figure. First, we are placing a strong source of light which is being denoted by capital S at the focus of a converging lens. So, here I am placing a converging lens. What was a converging lens? It is just like a convex lens. So, this converging lens or the convex lens provides a parallel beam of light. As you can see in the figure, there is a parallel beam of light. So, then we allow the light beam to pass through a transparent glass tank containing clear water. So, we pass it through a transparent glass tank that is having clear water. Then we allow the beam of light to pass through a circular hole. As you can see in the picture, there is a circular hole which is marked as C, and it is made in a cardboard. So, we make a hole in a cardboard through which we allow the beam of light to pass through. Then we obtain a sharp image of the circular hole on a screen which is placed behind that. And before forming this image on the screen which is denoted by MN, you can see there is a second converging lens that I have placed between the cardboard and the screen, and that is also yet another converging lens or convex lens. And now we need to find it through colloidal solutions, isn't it? For that, we need to dissolve about 200 gram of sodium thiosulfide, which is also called as hypo, in about 2 liters of clean water which is taken in the tank. So, in the first experiment we did it in case of clear water, isn't it? So, now we are going to repeat the same experiment in a colloidal solution, isn't it? For that, we are adding sodium thiosulfide, which is also called as hypo, in about 2 liters of the clear water, and that is taken in the tank that you can see. It is being represented by capital T. So, I add about 1 or 2 milliliter of concentrated sulfuric acid next to the water. So, now I have added into the water 200 gram of sodium thiosulfide in about 2 liters of water, and again I am adding about 2 milliliter of concentrated sulfuric acid to the water. Now, I am again repeating my experiment. What would happen? So, just have a thought about it. What would be our inference? As you can see, the final result will be the microscopic sulfur particles. As we have already told, I have added concentrated sulfuric acid to water, isn't it? Along with sodium thiosulfide. So, as you can see, after some time, about 2-3 minutes after, the microscopic sulfur particles will be precipitating. As the sulfur particles are beginning to form, you will see some differences. That is, from the sides of 3 sides of the glass tank, there will be blue light that is observed. Why does it happen? This is because of the scattering of short wavelengths by the colloidal sulfur particles. We have already said that blue color is having less wavelength, isn't it? So, they would be scattered most. So, the scattering of short wavelengths will be happening, and who is scattering it? It is the colloidal sulfur particles. So, if we observe the color of the transmitted light from the 4th side, we have said from 3 sides of tank we have a blue light, isn't it? But if we find an inference for the color of transmitted light from the 4th side of glass tank, that is facing the circular hole as you can see in the picture, what will you see? You can see that there is a color change. First, you will be observing a range of orange-red color, and as the time moves on, you will see that there is a shift from the orange-red to bright crimson-red, and that can be finally obtained on the screen. So, scattering of light happens in colloidal solutions too. Another important application when we consider the scattering of light is Tyndall effect. This Tyndall effect is being in our day-to-day lives when we are going through a forest, when there is morning sunrise and we move to a dark room. If you see a ray of light passing, all these cases the Tyndall effect is happening. How does the scattering of light contribute to Tyndall effect? That is, when a beam of light passes through a colloidal solution, as we have already discussed, colloidal solution is the one which is a mixture, isn't it? There will be some peculiar characteristics of colloidal solutions as we have already seen. What were they? There is microscopically dispersed insoluble particles, isn't it? And these insoluble particles will be suspended in another substance. So, one of the main important criteria, as we have said, is that suspended particles must not settle. So, the Tyndall effect happens in case of a colloidal solution. So, the path of the light becomes visible due to the scattering of light by the colloidal particles. Just like the previous experiment, the path of light will become visible due to the scattering of light by the colloidal particles. How does this happen as the case of colloidal particles? That is, the Earth atmosphere contains a large amount of particles in it. It is a heterogeneous one, isn't it? There will be air molecules, there will be dust particles, there will be smoke, water droplets, etc. So, what happens is that when sunlight passes through the atmosphere, then the path of light becomes visible in that region due to scattering of the light by these particles. And the final one is that the color of the scattered light will depend upon the size of the scattering particles. That is, very fine particles will scatter the blue light and the larger particles scatter the different colors of light. When we pass through a dense forest, we can observe that when sunlight passes through a canopy of forest, a dense forest, then the Tyndall effect is being observed. In that case, the tiny water droplets which is present in the earth act as the main sources of scattering, and they scatter and leads to Tyndall effect. So, colloidal solutions are known to exhibit the Tyndall effect, and it is a phenomenon where the beams of light incident on colloids will be scattered due to interaction between the light and the colloidal particles. So, the light will be interacting with colloidal particles to finally give a scattering, and which leads to Tyndall effect. So, colloidal solutions always exhibit Tyndall effect. So, in this picture you can clearly see in the first one, when there is a dense forest and there is a thick canopy, when the rays is falling there will be Tyndall effect, isn't it? And also you can see when there is a dark room, when there is a ray of light coming, you can see the dust particles moving, isn't it? There is the scattering of light. And also in this picture of water, when there is a colloids added, there will be scattering of light. So, in daily life applications also, scattering of light finds different forms. So, in this particular chart, you can understand how the scattering is being performed. So, low wavelength for a color means they will be scattered more, isn't it? For example, when blue color and I am considering another color that is red, which one is having low wavelength? From this chart, you can easily infer that starting from violet, the violet will be having the least wavelength about the range of 400 nanometer, and the red, which is at the another end, it is having about 800 nanometer wavelength. So, which one will be having the low wavelength? The least wavelength is possessed by violet color. Then nearer to them is our blue color, isn't it? So, blue color is also having comparatively low wavelength when I consider with red color that is having a larger wavelength. So, the shorter wavelength lights like or colors like violet and blue light will be scattered more when we compare the longer wavelength colors like yellow, green, red, etc. Isn't it? So, the wavelength and scattering are inversely proportional. If it is low wavelength color, then they will be scattered more. I am sure by looking at this picture, you will be able to find how there is difference in wavelength and how the scattering of different colors occur in different situations. So, now we need to understand why the color of sky is blue. Now, you have understood what are the different ranges of wavelength for different colors, isn't it? For violet and blue, they are having low wavelength, they will be scattered more. What in case of red lights? They are having high wavelength so that they are not so scattered. So violet bends the most or scatters the most, whereas red, which is having the highest wavelength, will be scattered only less. So why is the sky blue? It is based on the scattering of light. We can understand and have a discussion on how the light scattering leads to color of the sky is blue. You know, the atmosphere is composed of a large number of particles, isn't it? So there are many dust particles, there are many fog particles, then air molecules, etc. So there are many fine particles also in the atmosphere, isn't it? So these fine particles in the atmosphere will be having the size smaller than the wavelength of the visible light. The thing is, they can scatter blue light, which is having a shorter wavelength than red light with a longer wavelength. That we have already said. The wavelength of the color and the scattering is inversely proportional. If they are having low wavelength, that particular color will be scattered more. So when sunlight passes through the atmosphere, as you can infer from this picture, when the sunlight passes through the atmosphere, the fine particles in the atmosphere scatter the blue color. Why does it scatter the blue color more strong? Because it is of lesser wavelength. So lesser wavelength means it's of a more scattering. So the atmosphere will scatter the blue color more strongly than the red, which is having high wavelength. So sky almost all time appears to be blue to us. So there is an interesting question now. Suppose if Earth had no atmosphere, what would be the color? You may be having a wide range of answers, isn't it? You may be saying blue or green, yellow, something. But the real answer is that it would appear dark or black, isn't it? It's because there is no scattering of light at all happening. So, at high altitudes, where there is absence of atmospheric changes, the sky appears dark in case of such high altitudes. So, I am pretty much confident that you will be able to answer why the color of sky is blue based on the scattering process. So now we need to analyze why there is a difference in the color of sun during sunrise and sunset. What is the real color of sun and how is it varies in time of sunrise and sunset? For that we need to analyze this particular figure. That is, in this particular figure the observer is being given and the positions of sun in different cases. When the sun is nearly overhead and when it is appearing in a reddish color, etc. So during sunrise, as you all know, the sun will be located near the horizon. So the light or the sunlight will have to travel a long distance through Earth's atmosphere at the time of sunrise, since sun is located near the horizon. So at the time of sunrise or sunset, when white sunlight falls on the suspended atmospheric particles, we already know that atmosphere is composed of a large number of particles, isn't it? So at the time of sunrise or sunset, when sunlight falls on these atmospheric particles, then what happens? We know the atmosphere will scatter the blue color light, isn't it? But the one color which is having longer wavelength, that is red color, that the light scatters will be in a less amount, and that will reach the eyes of the observer on the surface of Earth. Hence, when this less scattered red light reaches the eyes of the observer, the other surroundings near the sun also appear reddish. So, what happens at the time of sunrise and sunset is that all the blue colored light are being scattered and the shorter wavelength is scattered in a bigger way. That is, the blue is being scattered in a bigger way and that is away from our eyesight. But what happens to the red color, which is having the more wavelength, about 800 nanometers, it is only less scattered. So the light reaching us mainly at the time of sunrise and sunset is the red, which is of longer wavelength. So this gives a rise to the reddish appearance of the sun. So at moon, what may be the condition? At moon, the sun will appear white because there only a little blue as well as violet colors are scattered. So from this picture you can understand why the sun is looking red at sunrise and sunset, since red is being least scattered and that reaches our eyes faster than the blue, which is scattered all throughout, which is having shorter wavelength. This is a very beautiful view of the sun having its differences in sunrise and sunsets.